Welcome to the Young Wealth Show, where you'll truly learn how to make, spend, and invest money for an awesome life. Get the real-life stuff that wasn't part of your school curriculum. Young Wealth gives you innovative new ways of dealing with your finances, as well as the skills and tools you're going to need to survive and be successful out on your own. Let the Young Wealth Show be your GPS to take you from clueless to clued in. Here's your host, Jason Hartman, with Young Wealth.
Welcome to the Young Wealth Show. This is your host, Jason Hartman, and this is show number 7, lucky number 7. Today we've got a very appropriate show because we are interviewing the author of a book by the same name, Young Wealth. Trade Secrets from Teens Who Are Changing American Business. And I think you'll really like what Jon Swartz has to say. He is the money reporter for USA Today, and he's written a nice little book that is all about profiling some different young people and some amazing things that they've done, whether their age be 16 or 26. It's just really got some great biographies and sort of a study of some of the characteristics of success at a young age. So I think you'll really like this. He is an award-winning reporter with more than 2 decades of experience covering technology and business at several publications, including USA Today, San Francisco Chronicle, the London Independent, and this series I think you'll really enjoy. So a lot more here. Without further ado, let's just get to the show, and I think you're going to find some interesting tips and tidbits on what it takes to be successful at a young age, and of course that's what the Young Wealth Show is all about. So let's go to our discussion with Jon and hear a lot more about Young Wealth. My pleasure to welcome Jon Swartz to the show. He is the money reporter for USA Today, and interestingly and very appropriately, he is the author of a book entitled Young Wealth. How's that for a perfect fit for the show? Trade Secrets from Teens Who Are Changing American Business. Jon, welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Great to have you here. This is an interesting book. What was the inspiration for it, just quickly, before we dive into the content?
Well, years ago, I had heard about a young man who was probably about 17 years old at the time. He was a business whiz who started his own San Francisco-based software company. Actually, he'd started it when he was 12, and between going to high school and meeting with venture capitalists and high-tech executives, he started this company and built it into a multi-million-dollar company. His name is Ben Casnocha. So I mentioned it to my editor, and eventually I wrote the story. By the time I'd finished the story, I wanted to do even more profiles, and ironically enough, a publisher called me around the same time and said, why don't you write a series of profiles about teenagers who've started businesses successfully in the U.S., regardless of what the business is.
This is definitely interesting. I mean, you've profiled all of these different 14 to 19-year-olds. They got to be teenagers. That's one of the rules. And kind of looked at how they did. And you've got a few that are older, but they've already really started a business here. Talk about Ben maybe first to kind of kick it off, and let's profile some of these kids and hear about what they did.
Well, Ben was interesting in that he was probably the furthest along among all the kids. There had been some talk about him through people in the VC and high-tech community who I talked to. They would mention this kind of prodigy who was going to high school while he was running a business at the same time. He was being helped by his dad, who's an attorney. They put together a software company. What's interesting to me is that with so many startups, you almost have to devote most of your time to building a company, but he found the time to do this at night to the point where I don't think he really slept at all, in the morning, at lunchtime. And what helped him was this whole equalizer of the Internet. In a sense, he and some other kids who I eventually found were using the Internet as kind of an equalizer. They didn't need it. They didn't need a lot of funding. They didn't need a lot of people. As long as they had an interesting idea and a little bit of support, they could build a company from very modest origins to up to Ben's multi-million-dollar business, leveraging the Internet. So that's how really I got interested in him in particular. He also was very photogenic, and he was very smart in how he made decisions. For instance, after we profiled him, he got a ton of media requests, and he only did a couple of them. For instance, he turned down MTV, for instance, because he anticipated that they wanted to treat him as kind of a strange or almost, I would hate to say, freakish type of individual, and he sensed that. So he had a really savvy business acumen. He was also very smart about making his choices. He actually parlayed the interview I did with him into even more exposure. He got a book deal. He's now in Peru. He was just on CNN, by the way. He's very, very good. I mean, actually, another thing he did, he leveraged, again, this interview into an even bigger spotlight. 2020 ended up doing, a few years ago, a whole hour devoted to the topic of winners. One of the segments was on young people who are ultra successful, and they interviewed me for the segment, but they also asked me to choose one person who I thought best epitomized the people in my book, and I chose Ben, and he came off flawlessly on television.
That's fantastic. So are these really tech businesses mostly, or do you really run the gamut? Because tech is a very young industry, obviously, and you're located in San Francisco, so it's sort of fitting. Do they center on tech, or do you really look in every industry, every vertical?
Well, I decided rather than make it one tech story after another, which would probably bore people, I wanted to go to as many different and divergent topics as possible. So, for instance, there is a young sportscaster out of Syracuse University who was on ESPN.com, had conducted interviews with Muhammad Ali, O.J. Simpson, Pete Rose, Jim Brown. His name was Graham Benzinger. I decided to choose him because he was in the media industry. There was Rachel Pilch-Loeb, who was a jewelry maker who'd raised thousands of dollars for cancer research by selling her handmade jewelry online. There was Elizabeth Wickstead, who was a aspiring model, who ended up becoming a model and doing some other stuff beyond that. I wanted to kind of give a flavor of different paths to different success. Some are easier than others, like the modeling one and the sports broadcasting would probably be just as hard, if not harder, than tech, since there's so much competition for something that most people can do. Tech, you can differentiate yourself in a certain way. So you're right. I tried to broaden it as much as possible. Tried to get as many females as males. Tried to get them from different parts of the country and different demographics. Some kids were well off, some weren't well off. One of the challenges I had was trying to find young African American kids. There just weren't that many actually in this field, and that's reflected in the statistics.
Well, that's interesting you mentioned that, because I noticed that you profile EO, which I've been an EO or YEO, formerly member for 10 years, and Nifty. And I remember at one of the conferences, they spoke there. They're involved with EO, and they really look at a lot of the inner city businesses and help incubate them and so forth.
Well, interestingly enough, I was going to tell you, it was funny. Years later, I think it was even last year, there was a special program that was started by the owner of the Cleveland Cavaliers, Dan Gilbert. And the idea is that Dan is from Michigan, and he wanted to create this kind of, incubator for would-be entrepreneurs. And a lot of them were African American, just as many as white kids, and they were given scholarships to help create businesses. And if those businesses were successful after a year-long apprenticeship, he would give them even more funding to take the concept even further. Now, that's just started in Detroit, and they're thinking about bringing it to other urban areas around the country that don't have much in terms of entrepreneurs or even tech startups. And I wish that program was around earlier, but I mean, the fact that it's around is great. And I believe Magic Johnson has been involved in lending his support, among other people. Dave Bing, a former NBA player who's now the mayor of Detroit, is also involved in the program.
So qualities in terms of, I really want to explore like the attitudinal qualities as much as possible, and the inspiration for these different young people to start and become successful at a business. I mean, I think everybody in the Gen Y generation understands that they're not going to work for someone anymore, for very long at least, and they're not going to be there 40 years like maybe their parents or their parents' parents and get the gold watch. Everything is very, very much in a state of flux nowadays. People need to be very adaptable and very innovative with their careers, and not really even look at a job like it's a job, but more like I'm selling my services to an employer. I'm their vendor in a way.
That's a good question. That was one thing I was looking at for these kids, is did they share certain characteristics or attitudes? And the answer is, for the most part, they did. They were good students. They had tunnel vision to the point where they excluded almost everything else in their lives. It almost reached a point where they really, for them it was work, school, and nothing else. They also had a bit, and I think it may have been kind of a problem, maybe it could be a problem for some, is that they had this single-mindedness to the point where they were convinced they had the answers for almost everything they encountered. So they almost had this bulletproof mentality, and you could sense a bit of tension between themselves and their parents or people they worked with. But in a sense, you have to be that way. I think if you want to be successful at anything, you have to have your strength of your convictions.
No question about it.
You have to be a hard worker. You have to have a bit of luck, and you have to have the right timing. All of these kids seem to have those aspects, most of those aspects, not all of them. I think Ben was the one who probably had most of those going for him at the same time. But it helped because his dad was an attorney and he had financial wherewithal to do this. But you're right. It'd be interesting for me to go back to these guys in a few years when they're in their 20s to see if they stuck with what they were doing or if they maybe moved on to something else. I would almost assume they would move on to something else. I mean, once you start an idea, it's never perfect, and maybe you modify it or you decide, wait a second, this was the wrong approach. Maybe I veer off to this angle and do it a different way. It is interesting, though. A lot of them were so convinced that what they were doing was right. I almost came to the conclusion that some would stick with what they were doing even if they encountered obstacles that maybe hindered their business plans.
The interesting thing about it, too, is that entrepreneurship lends itself so well to the Gen Y generation because there's really so little risk. Anyone who's got a family and a house payment and all of the typical responsibilities developed later in life, they've got a lot to lose. But when you're young, you don't have much to lose.
Right, exactly. You know? They didn't have much of a financial gambit. But the one thing also that was interesting to me is they were so comfortable with the internet age where you throw out an idea. If it doesn't work, you modify it a little bit. If that doesn't work, you keep modifying it. They were so comfortable, and they were so used to working fast and at all hours of the day and kind of learning as they went along. And I think a lot of them didn't want to end up like their parents in some cases or even some relatives who'd been laid off. I wrote this book a few years ago. The economy was doing fairly well, but I think that they were scared of this idea of being like their elders. You spend 20 to 30 years at a company in some cases, and then you're without a job and you really have no transferable assets or abilities that make you attractive to people. I mean, that's happening now.
Right, sure.
And I think they kind of anticipated that.
That's a sad thing that's going on in America, and ever since we started re-engineering the corporation and right-sizing it and downsizing it, that's been one of the terrible symptoms. I mean, so many jobs have been automated or offshored that high-quality people that really did everything right, got the formal education and so forth, they have not been rewarded.
Cast aside, right?
Yeah, they're cast aside.
It was,
yeah.
It's still one of those issues that we're going to see a lot of, and in a sense, I think that some of these kids actually mentioned to me this whole idea that they didn't want to end up looking for jobs, actually not being in control. Maybe that's the way to put it. A lot of them just like the idea of having control. They're running their own company. They're hiring and in some cases firing people who don't work well with them. They like the idea of being the one making the decisions, and in a lot of cases, they saw people who were older than them who were at the mercy of other people's decisions.
Right. It's funny because yesterday I just so happened to watch a couple of videos on YouTube, and one was Steve Jobs' commencement speech
at Stanford.
At Stanford, right. Yeah. And that was a 2005 speech, I believe. And then Bill Gates, when he got his honorary doctorate at Harvard. Both of these guys dropped out of school.
Exactly. Exactly. They said the interesting thing is a lot of these kids probably won't finish school, and it really wasn't that important to them because they look at people like Bill Gates who dropped out of Harvard or Steve Jobs who dropped out of Reed College up in Portland. It's not really necessary. If your idea is that good, why would you? It's like being a professional athlete. Why would you spend your time, in many people's opinions, wasting their time spinning their wheels for several years when they could get a jump on everyone else? There was a kid named Christopher Tate who ran a photo sharing website service on the internet, and he felt that way when he spoke with me. He said he liked the idea of kind of getting a jump on his would-be competitors rather than spinning his wheels in college. And you're right. I mean, a lot of them are sitting there thinking, what am I learning here when I already have a pretty good jump on the competition?
I want to make a point about college because I think this is a hotly contested and debated issue, obviously. Parents generally want their kids to go to college, of course. But here's my thought on it, and tell me what you think about this. I think college sets a bit of a floor below which people are unlikely to fall if they finish college. However, it doesn't set a ceiling, and there's really no ceiling, and especially nowadays, the old concept of the college dropout, maybe for anybody who's over 50 years old, for example, is you drop out of college because you want instant gratification and you want to make money digging ditches or building houses or waiting tables or whatever, and you like that money. But nowadays, the college dropout has been completely redesigned. Nowadays, the college dropout is usually the entrepreneur, and it skews and leans toward tech side, and tech is very high leverage, of course, because you build the better mousetrap and the world beats its path to your door. So it's much different nowadays if you're dropping out because you're looking at a highly leverageable opportunity that isn't a go-nowhere thing like waiting tables or building houses type of thing. It's just a different deal than it used to be.
I know, it was really ironic. I was talking to the former dean of the Syracuse School of Broadcasting, Newhouse School, and he was bemoaning the grades of Graham Benzinger, who now has his own radio show. He said, Benzinger's putting too much time into his own show and fulfilling his career. And I said, well, would you rather have him stay in college and not get the experience that he's getting now, and then have him try to get a job once he gets out of college, from ground zero? In that field in particular, in media, the more experience you have, the more marketable and more hireable you are. And I think Graham made that sacrifice knowing that his grades may not be particularly great, but he had an instant job when he got out, and that puts him years ahead of his peers. So, it's a calculated risk. I know Ben Casnocho wanted to go to a college in Southern California, which he did, but he also wanted to spend a lot of time traveling and experiencing the world. He wrote a book. How can you measure the quality of that? And again, I'm not, to step back, these are extreme individuals who are in positions to do this. I'm not saying everyone should do this. I think it'd probably be folly for people to drop out of high school or drop out of college and pursue something they may not be successful at. But if you started and you've leveraged your way into doing something that can be significant, why not pursue it as far as you can? It gives again, in the end, it gives you more control than when you graduate from college and you find yourself unemployed.
It's interesting, too, what's going on now is that a lot of people are just staying in college,
right,
because they don't want to come out into the job market right now.
I think it's getting better. Just for my own reporting at USA Today in the last couple of months, I've sensed that a lot of, especially tech companies, are starting to hire again, and they're starting to hire a lot of people, actually. So I think it's lifting a little bit, but you're right. The last couple of years have been as bad a job market as I can imagine if you're coming out of college.
Yeah, no question about it. Well, hey, let's go back and just talk about any more qualities you see in the people profiled, or any more profiles you want to share. Tell us about a few more of them, if you would.
Well, Elizabeth Wickstead is a young lady in New Jersey who wanted to pursue a career in modeling, which is long odds. But she did. She used the internet to extend her brand as well as anyone I've seen. Actually, I was going to do a quick look on Facebook to see how many friends she was up to, or even on Twitter. She had thousands upon thousands of people who were following her, and she built this whole kind of legion of people who wanted to see more of her, whether modeling or her face affixed to some T-shirt or some sort of goods. She used the internet in a way that a lot of celebrities use it, but she did this years ago before it really became popular, or kind of the way to reach, like Ashton Kutcher has, 2 million followers on Twitter. I'm probably overestimating it, but I'm probably not too far off. They decided, look, here's the way I project myself to the public. I bypass the media filter. I go directly to them. I tell them what I think. I become their friend in a sense, and I use that phrase really loosely. But it's like the whole Facebook era where you become someone that people think they know about. They become your fan. They've never met you. Maybe they like the way you look, or they like what you say or how you say it. She kind of had an early grasp of doing that. And it was interesting. In the book, one thing I did was, for every chapter, I would talk to somebody who had made it in that particular field. So for the Graham Benzinger chapter, I talked to Bob Costas, who also went to Syracuse. For Elizabeth, I talked to Cindy Margolis, who was the famous, the most famous woman on the internet. I talked to Tila Tequila before she really took off. And they would tell me, yeah, that's the same thing I'm trying to do. There are parallels between what I do and younger people are trying to do. That's probably something that we share with them, like this kind of vision or thirst to be successful and taking certain pathways. So for Elizabeth, it was just almost the opposite of Ben. It was all based on projecting yourself to complete strangers. He was talking to people that he knew and was building a business that way. She was doing it through the public.
That's interesting. You see these early stories back to the MySpace days of people who just really, really leveraged that and had a million followers or a million fans. I can't remember what MySpace even calls them, but it's really incredible the amount of leverage available for people that understand how to use it and take advantage of it nowadays. And that's the great thing about the web and the great thing about tech. Any more? How about another profile?
Let's think. I'm thinking of one other that kind of would grab your attention because I'm telling you, I wrote this book a few years ago, and there's one kid actually I was thinking about in Atlanta, a guy named Sean Belnick. He ran a company called BizChair.com, and it probably, among all the companies, created the most amount of revenue. I think it grossed $20 million in 2006. He was a kind of a self-made millionaire. Mm-hmm. He was going to college at the same time he was running the company, and he found a balance between being ultra successful in college and being ultra successful running his business. So he was at Emory University in Atlanta. Meanwhile, he and his stepfather were running this company on the side. He was really good about kind of compartmentalizing his life. In a sense, he had a nice balance between enjoying his college experience while he was running this successful business. Maybe he was the one who was the best at it, but what helped him was he had a stepdad who, in a sense, was his partner in the business. So he had somebody he could trust, and they built out a whole business. So he didn't have to be there all the time, and he could trust when he wasn't around, somebody else would take care of things for him. I thought that was a smart and kind of healthy example. Most of the other kids, for the most part, were doing it on their own. Although there was another kid, Richard Gianfronte, who had just a very simple web-based business, neverforgetadate.com for absent-minded folks, right, like his dad who would forget their anniversaries or people's birthdays. It was like a really simple idea. His dad was a software executive. He didn't really need much financial help because this thing was inexpensive business to run. So he did a bang-up job, and that company's still around too, by the way. And his dad didn't believe in venture capitalists. He didn't believe in taking VC funding because he wanted to control his own company, and so his son is going in the same footsteps.
Right. Yeah, that definitely goes both ways. When you take on venture capital or any outside capital, you do give up some control.
Right, you lose that control, and a lot of these kids, if they could, they would bypass funding and maintain everything strictly under their watch.
You know, they say entrepreneurs are workaholics. They say they're monomaniacs with a mission. What have you noticed about, obviously these are formative years and they're the time where people should really be socializing and making lifelong friendships and doing that kind of thing. Are these entrepreneurs stuck in their bedroom or in front of a computer screen, or are they...
A lot of them were actually, their grades would suffer, and they were willing to make the trade-off between their high school years and being ultra successful. I know Graham Benzinger, it was in high school and in college, he would be up burning the midnight oil at 2 or 3 in the morning. Same thing with Ben Kesnocha, Christopher Tate. They made a calculated decision and thought, well, you know, for every reward there is a trade-off or there is a risk.
I wonder if it's worth it.
Ben actually was on the high school basketball team. Some of the other kids they're overachievers. You know, that's another thing. They're overachievers, so they parcel out their time to do as much as they possibly can, and they don't really need much. They're young. They don't need much time to sleep. They had all sorts of energy at that point.
Right.
Probably still do. Yeah.
Sure. You're the money reporter for USA Today. I just thought I'd get your general take on what's going on out there today. We encountered a huge financial crisis 2 years ago. Probably we're in the worst economy in 7 decades.
I think it's getting...
You think it's getting better?
Earlier, I think it's getting better. The tech companies are kind of leading the comeback.
Uh-huh.
Those are the first to emerge from this problem. This as you call it, maybe the Great Recession. So we have several tech companies who kind of surfaced out of it early, and even those companies that were having problems are starting to hire again. I think Yahoo's on a big hiring spree. You've got Oracle is hiring, Google, a number of them who had been going through problems before or just struggling a little bit. And I think you're starting to see the stock prices are starting to rebound, although that's not the greatest indicator of the economy. But, I mean, we're not out of the woods by any measure, but I think there is some sort of progress, and any type of progress, any type of good news psychologically is great for people who've been going through this for years.
What do you think about this talk about a jobless recovery, where we could actually see a recovery in the economy, I guess in the technical aspects and probably consumer spending, but still high unemployment, sort of sustained high unemployment?
A lot of the companies, including ours at Gannett with Jones USA Today, they've come to this conclusion that we've laid off a number of people, yet we're still getting the same amount or near the same amount of productivity out of maybe 70% of the people we used to have. So the pressure is as much on them. I mean, it's wearing for the people who are still left there, who are doing the work of 1.5 to 2 people each. So I think as long as employers probably can get away with that, you're probably going to see them continue to grind who's left, or cut back, or outsource, or do things like crowdsourcing, where you hire people over the internet to do special projects, or you hire them on a kind of per diem basis.
Sure, exactly, as contractors. But you've definitely seen worker productivity skyrocket. I mean, where everybody
they have no choice.
Everybody in a big firm is doing 5 people's jobs because those other 4 people aren't there anymore. So what advice, just kind of in wrapping this up, would you have for a young person who's got an idea, who wants to start their own business, who doesn't want to work for the man, so to speak, and wants to just go for it?
I think you almost, why not? The barriers to entry are as low as they've ever been. The Internet, in a sense, gives you the opportunity through distribution, word of mouth, marketing, awareness of what you're doing. I mean, if you're very good at getting the word out and publicizing what you want to do, it's a great way to start. And if it fails, so be it. Move on to your next idea. And if that doesn't work, go on to idea number 3, or stay in college. As you were saying earlier, a lot of people are staying in college longer. I honestly really do think that things are going to pick up in the second half of the year. I thought it would have happened a year ago. I was wrong, but I truly think that things are starting to turn around for the better. But if you do have a good idea, what's going on too is a lot of companies, especially Oracle, IBM, the larger guys, Cisco, the way they make money now isn't through their own innovation so much as it is through acquiring startups or companies that have good ideas. They buy those companies and then use those companies to add to their revenue. That's how they get most of their revenue now. The market for acquisitions, M&A activity, is actually pretty good right now. So if you start something and maybe you think it's going to take off, you hold out long enough, you find somebody who's willing to pick it up from you, so be it.
Good stuff. Any thoughts before you go on raising capital for a young person? Are there any specific sources or networks or incubators that they should check out?
No, I really don't. I mean, I wouldn't recommend one over any other. In a sense, as Richard Gianfrante's dad, Greg, who's a successful software CEO in his own right, a lot of these guys love the idea of the concept of bootstrapping, where you don't give up control. And I think as long as you can hold on to what you have and try to build it and nurture it, I think that might be the best choice.
Good stuff. Well, Jon Swartz, thank you so much for joining us today. The book is Young Wealth, Trade Secrets from Teens Who Are Changing American Business. Where can people get the book?
The best way is Amazon. The book's been out for 4 years, so it's not going to be in a bookstore, but if you go online and do a search for Young Wealth and Jon Swartz, which is JONSWARTZ, I know there are copies available through Amazon.
Excellent. Well, Jon, thanks so much for sharing these insights today. We appreciate having you.
Thanks for having me, Jason.
Copyright the Hartman Media Company. For publication rights and interviews, please email media@jasonhartman.com. This show offers very general information concerning real estate for investment purposes. Opinions of guests are their own. Jason Hartman is acting as president of Platinum Properties Investor Network exclusively. Nothing contained herein should be considered personalized, personal, financial, investment, legal, or tax advice. Every investor's strategy and goals are unique. You should consult with a licensed real estate broker or agent or other licensed investment, tax, and/or legal advisor before relying on any information contained herein. Information is not guaranteed. Please call 714-820-4200 and visit www.jasonhartman.com for additional disclaimers, disclosures, and questions.